yeah, inside there was something missing, and I couldn't really put my finger on it at the time. What wasn't right? And you do that thing where you go, oh well, I'll be grateful for what I've got, but as hard as I tried to be grateful, there was still something missing. And
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Exploring You, our guide to navigate you through the personal development jungle. My name's Darren Alexandra of the Elysium NLP and Mind Core CIC. Normally, my co-pilot, my co-host, Alexandra Katzer, is normally on with us, but she's off today. Unfortunately, she's got some tradesmen in and they're making a lot of noise, so it's not going to be really good for this podcast. But I do have the pleasure, the one-to-one pleasure of speaking to Mr. Bevis Moynan. Hi, Bevis. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good, mate. I'm very good. I do hope I've got your name right. It's like I say, it's a stickler for names.
Spot on, mate. Spot on.
Spot,
All good.
good stuff. So first and foremost, who are you?
Yeah, you said you were going to ask me that, and I thought, wow, where do we go with that question? So rather than giving you a philosophical, spiritual answer, I'll give you a bit of background. So yeah, obviously Bevis Moynan Magenta Coaching Solutions is our business, and it's a training and coaching company. And I kind of started my personal development journey in 2008 on a weird and wonderful NLP practitioner course. The chairman of my cricket club at the time went on an NLP course and came off it and started to get very excited and tell me stories over a cup of tea in the clubhouse and in the changing room. And I was like, this is interesting. But I didn't really understand what he was telling me. There was just something infectious about his enthusiasm and the fact he'd handed his notice in on a national sales manager role and set up a training company overnight. I was like, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And there was something he said to me. He asked me, I was a manager at the time, and he said to me, what leadership management development training have you had? And of course, the answer to that was precisely nothing. And yet I was managing people at the time, working in leisure. I'd had a background in sport. I wanted to be a professional cricketer when I was younger. Grew up in Yorkshire. Used to sleep with my cricket bat. Was kind of madly, geekily passionate about cricket. Found myself at Loughborough University studying sports science. Had a county cricket trial that I didn't turn up to. Didn't realise at the time I was a bit of a pattern going on at the time that I wasn't aware of. And found myself around 2008 in a job that would have seemed to everyone to have fitted. I was managing a leisure centre. I was captain of my local cricket club, a member of the local golf club. Everybody who knew me would have kind of looked at me and gone, yeah, but that fits. That's the kind of Bevis. But yeah, inside there was something missing, and I couldn't really put my finger on it at the time. What wasn't right? And you do that thing where you go, oh well, I'll be grateful for what I've got, but as hard as I tried to be grateful, there was still something missing. And so that conversation with James, kind of, I met him recently and thanked him for that, because that was a real tipping point, a turning point for me. Because I'd never really looked into personal development to that point. So I was very green on my NLP practitioner course, got loads out of it. Ended up coming back a boss who was a Yorkshireman who insisted in paying for the course. I had to come back and train other people in communication skills, which I remember the most nervous I've been as a trainer was training my peers. My management peers are all 20 years older than me in what I'd got out of the NLP course. And I remember waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning and massively over preparing. That would have been back in 2009. But it was a gift, really, because those training skills started to develop early on. Never thought of coaching, was still very cynical, thought life coaching and therapy was a load of bollocks, if I'm honest. Back then, I was very dour, very cynical. And then purely because I'd had such a good experience with the practitioner course, although I was still quite dismissive of the more therapeutic sides of it, the deeper elements, I was, at that point, I booked on a master practitioner course in 2010. And I remember on day one them saying, oh, you'll we want to start eliciting some of your subconscious blocks. And I remember thinking, I haven't got any. What are you talking about? And then 2 weeks later, it felt like 2 weeks later. I think our course was split up into two. I had a long list of a vision, a goal, and a long list of doubts, limiting beliefs, internal conflicts. I remember another tipping point in that course when the question was asked, describe you at your best. And I was, as a young man, playing a game of cricket, with the cricket ball in my hand, about to run into ball, and the game could have been won or lost on the outcome of that particular delivery. And the question was, what was present in that moment that's not usually present in an everyday waking moment? And I was like, pressure. Shit, I've been and it was like this massive light bulb moment. I'd spent a decade or more avoiding the one thing that I used to thrive upon when I was younger. So that was a bit of a moment on that course, and I went through a breakthrough coaching experience, which obviously you know well, and experienced that. Yep. Left that course feeling lighter, and I'd also had the experience of working with a partner on that course, and I've been coaching and using therapeutic tools now for 14 years, and still to this day I've never met anyone with the spectrum of issues that this particular chap had. And I was terrified, as you can imagine, working with somebody who'd had some very unpleasant things happen to them in their life. So up to this point, I had no intention of ever coaching anyone. Went through that experience of helping this person overcome quite a lot of stuff historically in their life. So I left that weekend and helped that person get an outcome that was positive for them. And I left that course a completely different person, because I set up a coaching company the day after the course. I never intended to going into it, never wanted to. And at the I almost felt this obligation, really. It's a weird thing to describe, but I felt this duty, this sense of, I kind of got to do this. I've got to share this with people. Never thought it would work, never thought it would lead to anything. So my first client was my assistant manager. Helped her. I grew in confidence. And 18 months after that course, or not quite, 20 months after that course, I'd left employment and was fully fledged in the coaching and therapeutic world, really. And then this is a long answer to your question. So
it's all right. I'm enjoying it. I'm reminiscing, to be quite honest, because we've done the same NLP training. So it's kind of resonating with me and bringing things back. And when you're saying about, being in that breakthrough session and coming out of it a completely different person, I get you. So please carry on.
So yeah, I mean, since then, that course was 2010. So I started the business the day after the course. Did that weird thing that you do when you look back when you become a parent. I kind of became a dad in 2011, moved house and left employment all at the same time, which looking back was nuts, but actually just felt right. I was very nervous and anxious, as you are when you set up a new business, but also just knew it was the right thing to do. There was something inside directing me in a different direction at that point. And then since then, really, all I've done is everything I've learned and used to help other people, including motivational mapping, which I got on board with and learned in 2012. I've just learned to help train other people to use those tools. So come fast forward to 2024, and we've got a community of motivational mappers and NLPers and therapists. And bizarrely, interestingly, as much as I tried to avoid working in sport because of my own, I remember the trainer actually offered to help me get into cricket clubs and to support county professional cricketers, and I was very anti. I kind of, because of my own scar tissue in that area, I didn't want to do it. But interestingly, without really any effort on our behalf, it's just kind of organically happened. I've ended up working with professional sports people and specifically golfers, which I'm a big golf guy. I've swapped my cricket geekness for my golf geekness now. So I'm a big golf geek, and I enjoy working with sports people one-to-one, and help them overcome some of the patterns that were clearly affecting me. So there's a bit of dharma, a bit of purpose in there, I think. So we're beginning to pay more attention to that side of what we do and actually give it a bit of energy. So a
bit like a busman's holiday then, isn't it, really? Going playing golf as you're doing it and training.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to combine a hobby with a passion, with a skill set. And yeah, so that's very enjoyable. I try not to tell when I'm playing recreation. I try not to tell people what I do because
Are you missing out on
so
business there?
well, possibly. I mean, I do sometimes. I never say never, but it's yeah. So that's a little bit. I still do sometimes, but sometimes I just want to focus on me and enjoy what I'm doing. So because it's that sort of game, it mirrors life a little bit.
Yeah, just get out on the green and play away. Just take
Yeah.
everything away. Just having a nice long trip around 18 holes and just take everything away from your head, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. There's something if you it can't I mean but it can be a frustrating game if you let it. But also actually, and that's the challenge, isn't it? The expectations, disappointment, frustrations. It mirrors life in those ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I quite like to practice what I preach and enjoy the experience.
1 second. I think we just there we are. Sorry, sorry, mate. We just had to
That's all right.
just jump into the equation there. Um, like I say, we've done the same NLP training. Well, we've done under the same banner. What I want to ask you is, if anybody wants to know about neuro-linguistic programming, which is NLP, I should have mentioned that. How do you describe it? Well, obviously, you do your training and everything else. How do you specifically describe NLP to your attendees?
Yeah, I mean it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's one of the questions on the NLP practitioner course. The last question is, how would you describe NLP? And we get lots of different descriptions from people, and we kind of, oh, that's a good one. We'll borrow that. It is a tricky thing to describe and explain succinctly. My explanation is that, or my favorite explanation is that NLP helps you to focus on what you want consciously and unconsciously, because a lot of people struggle with clarity. And so NLP helps you gain clarity of what you want, which that in itself is huge, right? If you can be clear on what you want, that's half the battle. But not only that, it helps you to align your both because that's consciously what you want, but unconsciously there could be all sorts of different stories or narratives or stuff going on that isn't in alignment with what you want. And that's really where NLP can feel a little bit magical at times, because when you let go of what's not in alignment with what you want, all of a sudden things come to you much more effortlessly. So that's my as succinct a description as I can describe it. And I think everyone's surprised too. That I had a conversation with a lady considering it this morning. I think everyone's surprised who learns NLP is how much it's about them.
Yes.
A lot of people come on the course and go, I'm going to learn this to help others. Well, yes, but let's just put that filter to one side for a moment and let's focus on you and you learning about you and overcoming the things that are holding you back and getting you enjoying life more and more fulfilled, more content. And then the other stuff of helping others will happen much more organically then.
Like you, when it come to therapy and things like that, I was like, yeah, lie down, tell me about your childhood. I don't think so. It wasn't my first choice to go to anything like therapy or anything like that. And I remember having the conversation with our trainer, and he said to us, first thing you got to do, Darren, is you got to do it on yourself. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not going to work. But he was absolutely right. You with NLP, it's something you have to. I suppose in a way, it's kind of an appreciation, isn't it? Once you realize that how much you can affect and change you for the better, that gives you a better stepping stone to help somebody else, doesn't it?
Yes, and that's that congruence and authenticity thing. That all of a sudden, if you've had a big breakthrough or you've had a big transition or shift yourself, then all of a sudden you're much more authentic and congruent about helping others. And there's also much more purpose. There's a mission that almost. I'm quite into my spirituality, and I love authors like Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle, and this idea of dharma or purpose confused me to begin with. But absolutely, you can now see myself and my clients that often the people with the most purpose in life are those who've had challenges, had issues, overcome those challenges, and now are helping others to do the same. And so it's a weird one, isn't it? When I first learned this stuff, it used to terrify me as a parent. Oh shit, we could do so much damage to our kids. Bloody hell. Apologies for swearing.
Sorry, it's not the BBC, it's all right.
Oh, cool. But then you realize actually that discomfort, that that those moments of scar tissue actually are often what are required to help people in the future evolve and overcome those issues. Because those who swim along in life and don't have many issues often aren't actually those that live with a great sense of purpose and passion. So it's often something, I mean, I wish it was different. I wish everyone would be just curious about this stuff, but often it's the difficulty that leads people in this direction.
And this is where the podcast come in, is to get people to see a broader vision of what's out there. It's NLP is not for, it's like anything, coaching, hypnosis, anything that it might not work for you, but it might work for, it might work if you give it a go. And I think that's key for people to understand from these podcast point of view, is that there's so much out there to help, and alternatively than going straight for the pills bottle. Not saying, pills won't help you. Some people need that. And I've got to say that more strenuously. So, but it's the difference that you can find in the different ideals, modalities, whatever it is you want to call it, in with NLP. I know certainly from my experience, it certainly changed me a lot after my breakthrough. And funny enough, it was actually a golf pro that actually was my breakthrough partner. And Chris, I always remember he nabbed the big high chairs that were in the not the armchairs with the big backs in the hallway of the hotel, outside the conference room that we were using. And they were big heavy chairs, and when he brought me out of from doing the timeline therapy, he was literally pushing his chair back as fast as he could go, because he said the shift on me, the physiology shift, scared the life out of him, and he thought I was going to lash out at him, and that's the moment when he said to me, what do you think of shame? I had a blank wall. I couldn't even spell it for a second, and that's, to me, the realization of that is how powerful NLP can be to make the change that you need. And even if it's just having that realization of where you're at, I think is one of the most important things, isn't it? That realization that you've got that issue, and it's accepting that issue and then doing something about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's two things that sprung to mind when you were talking then. One, that over the years, because you learn, don't you? You learn by going on training course, and then you learn from experience. And what I've noticed over the years is that NLP is great for people when they're coming out of an acute phase. So when people are in an acute phase and they're actually kind of near rock bottom, actually medication, counseling, those sorts of things are great. And then often we'll find people find NLP often after a course of counseling, or that they're now more aware, but they haven't yet let go. And that's where I think NLP, and when people are in that phase, they're not in the acute phase anymore. They've moved out of that, and now they're ready and open for change, and real change, because it is transformational. Which reminds me of your second story. So as an NLP trainer, I used to pick my demo subjects very carefully when we're doing a demonstration, especially with the deeper stuff. I'd pick who's gonna make the easiest demo subject for me to work with. And then over years of experience, and I then went, actually, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to pick the demo subject I think is going to be the most powerful for the audience. And I did that recently, and then wished I hadn't, because that experience you've just described was exactly what happened. We had a chap who's a very brave guy, ex-Marine, obviously been in various war zones, had various stuff happen, and he'd never had any therapeutic process prior. He'd also spent years a long time in a hospital bed after a certain injury. So when we really started to release an emotion as a demonstration, it was very, very powerful viscerally, and credit to him for allowing himself to be so vulnerable. But of course, you get in a little bubble as a therapist, and you kind of forget that there's a demonstration going on. And there's all this, he's releasing this emotion, and people are watching it, and there's tears running down his face, which are tears of release as opposed to tears of pain. But of course, this is on an NLP practitioner course, who've never seen any timeline therapy before. And when it came to, who's ready to have a go at timeline? It was like,
Were they all running for the door?
It was a real interesting moment, and it's great because actually, what ultimately it was the right thing, because some of the people in the room have gone deeper than they might have done, as opposed to just giving it a go on a practitioner course as a result. But yeah, it can be, well, it is very powerful for people when they're ready, and I think that's the key, isn't it? It's that readiness for change and openness for change, and if people are in that space, then wow, the results can be phenomenal.
Absolutely. I do say, I know I wish I'd seen it earlier and didn't have that mindset originally about therapy. It had been a lot easier for me a lot longer, and I'd been doing it a lot longer. And these, I mean, we've spoken to a number of people who've done NLP and NLP trainers as well, and they've gone on to other things where they kind of moved away from NLP. They've said, yes, it's good to start, but then they've moved on to other things. What's your what's your concept about that?
Yeah, I think it's very pertinent that. So I nearly quit NLP training about 4 or 5 years ago. So I remember it well. I was getting in my own head about the fact we'd only got a small number of delegates on the course. And then I had this amazing course and met this amazing person who's well, I wouldn't say a key person in my life, but somebody who I can imagine I'm going to be a lifelong connection with that person, because it was just an amazing human being. And so that was an interesting experience. And then I found myself on another weird and wonderful course in Bali, which is an entrepreneurial course, and but it was also a slight spiritual course as well. And I read a strange book that had me in floods of tears. It was about I can't even remember the book title, but it was about a medium in America. So it wouldn't have been my sort of thing normally, but actually I was like, wow, this person's actually just healing through this particular different way of that's how I interpreted it anyway. It's just a different form of healing, certainly with what she was doing anyway. And in NLP, obviously, we ask for a signal from inside. And part of what I was reading about was actually getting a signal from outside. And I remember on this course in Bali that there was a chap on it who was this incredible Indian businessman, speaker, very, very humble. So it took me 8 days to realize when he spoke, he usually spoke to 2,000 people at a time. I was like, wow, that puts my 10 people in a room training to shame. Like, wow. So an quite high profile character in India, and an amazing guy. And he told me a story about his brother, how his brother hadn't been so fortunate and had struggled, and he bought his brother some land just before his brother had died. And his brother had died in his arms as well. It was quite an emotive story. He'd had an epileptic fit and had a seizure, and then passed away. And there was something there's something in this, both this book and the context. It was quite a spiritual venue that we're at, where I just got this overwhelming sense that I should, and we all were asked to write a post-it note message for each person on the course, which they then got to read on the plane on the way home, which is quite a nice thing to do. And I got this overwhelming sense of wanting to write a message saying that your brother would love you to do something with that land. And now immediately, the moment I thought of that, I started to get a load of doubt going, who are you to do that? That's nonsense. What a load of BS. So I was then, okay, if this, but it was quite compelling. It just wouldn't go away. So I then said, okay, if this thing about external signals is right, I will see 4 butterflies today before I go in the training room. And I walked from my room to breakfast. No surprise, 2 butterflies. Now you could put an NLP approach on this, where you've just projected that out and now you're seeing it, of course. So I saw 2 butterflies on the way away to breakfast. Then I was pouring my breakfast. There was glass windows. There was a butterfly on the plant outside. So there's 3. And then I saw the 4th butterfly on the way to the course. So I put the post-it note, and I've no idea the impact, no idea what happened. But I did write the post-it note and send it. But it also gave me that idea when I was thinking about quitting NLP in the UK. I did the same thing. I was in February. It was in February, and at my premises there's a balcony, and then there's it's not my premise. I'm on a golf course, so I've got a room just to make it sound really grand. So there's an open area, and there's a balcony, like a quadrangle. And I was walking to the kitchen, and there's a chap called Adrian, who's a ex-army guy, lovely chap, and he's kneeling down on the floor. And this is February in the UK. And I'd done the same thing, said, okay, if it's the right thing for me to carry an NLP training, I will see a butterfly today. Now I was expecting if I saw one, I'd see one on a billboard or somewhere. And then he's kneeling down on the floor. And I knew. I said to him, Ed, is that a butterfly? And he looked up to me confused and went, yeah. February in the UK indoors. Weird. So I carried on NLP training. I think what happens is if you go on the personal development journey, and we both know valuable thinking, you end up becoming more spiritual and more ethereal, because actually quantum physics and science also points you in that direction. And that can be a conflict, because the NLP is about techniques and it's about the unconscious mind. And what I remember another pivotal moment where I became even more congruent with NLP when actually I was teaching value section. We had an odd number of people on the course, and my co-trainer kept dipping in to work with people, and he said, "Oh, Bevis, I've had enough. You be okay. I'll." And I said, "Yeah, we're doing values. What on earth am I going to do work on values with?" And he went, "Well, you're always rattling on and prattling on about spirituality. Why don't you have your spirituality values listed?" I was like, okay. So I did, and they were 50-50 conflicted. So I was conflicted around spirituality, which made perfect sense, because I was either meditating or feel guilty that I wasn't meditating. So, and it was a really interesting process, because the light bulb came up in the process. And I always find this fascinating. I was working with an 18-year-old as well, which I think is amazing for an 18-year-old to have found NLP. Wow.
Yeah.
And she was doing a great job with me, and the light bulb just went on. You bloody idiot. If you're sharing your knowledge to help people, what's more spiritual than that? And I was like, so I suddenly kind of I went through a phase of lack of congruency with NLP, and then went, actually, it's not about where I'm at, it's about where other people are at. And NLP is an amazing tool to help people overcome their stuff. And then that might open a gateway and a doorway to other modalities that come later. And interestingly, one of the people who trained me in NLP has actually just entered into our community, and is going to come up, because I think she's been on that journey, gone off on a spiritual kind of quest, and is now thinking, actually, this stuff can really help people. So, so I think I did a talk at our conference recently, and just said, look, when we're coaching, it's obvious, isn't it? It's about the client. But it's easy for us to fall in love with various modalities and forget that and just subtly forget that really whatever we're most excited about, that kind of doesn't matter. It's about what the client needs at the right time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who say to me, "Oh, have you listened to this guy? Have you seen this thing? Have you seen there's a latest fad that's out there to do that?" But NLP, I always draw back to NLP, and I think it's because I've used it for myself. I've used it on clients, and I've seen the difference, in talking to people. And you do kind of, it is like we always say, it's a toolbox. You might have 6 different hammers, in your toolbox, and it's the same with NLP. You've got 6 different tools there that could either do the same thing or do a slight change on each one that makes that difference, and that light bulb moment comes to the client and even ourselves. It's it is the flexibility of that, isn't it? It's like one of the presuppositions. It's about having that flexibility to be able to change. And I think that's the key thing for me. With the beauty of it is it's so adaptable to any kind of situation. And those light bulb moments are brilliant when it comes out of people. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, there's nothing better than being able to have those light bulb moments yourself and help others do the same. And as well, that thing that often we're coaching ourselves, aren't we? We're doing a coaching client, and we think, oh crikey, that person's just where I was a year ago or 6 months ago, or that's the challenge I had 3 years ago, or we've just read a book that actually is the perfect metaphor for that person. It's amazing how that happens in the journey.
And I was talking to somebody the other day about unconscious bias and conscious bias. I mean, we talk about tipping point. I was also reading Michael Gladwell's book, other book. I just started that on called Blink, and the start of it is about the unconscious. So they did an experiment in the state at one of the universities in the States where they had 4 sets of cards, 2 red, 2 blue, and there was a gambling game, and they had these students in and said, like, this, if you pick a card, it could make you a fair bit of money. If you pick another card, well, that could lose you a lot of money. And the way the game went, the realization was, if you picked up the blue cards, you got the money. If you picked up the red cards, you're going to lose money. And it took them about 40 attempts, 40 sets of cards before they realized, this is where it's at. The blue cards are going to give us the money. 80 goes later, they know the whole game. You've got an idea. But what they actually did was they taped sensors to the sweat glands on the palm of the hands of the students. Because obviously when you're stressed and that's where you get your clammy hands, because the sweat comes through from your hands. And what they realized, it was actually by the 10th set, they've kind of got a notion, because they started sweating. It's like, hang on, we've got something here. But it was 30 sets beforehand that they knew it was there. So it's that unconsciousness that we miss to find the bigger picture. And I suppose in a way, it's like the old gut feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know that change is there, but then your consciousness comes in, and that kind of takes over that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's the paradox of personal development. I mean, that mirrors a lot of the conversation I have with golfers, because they think they're going to learn about the mental game, they think they're going to learn stuff. And I'm like, no, what we need to do is get your mind out of the way, so that you can get your conscious mind out of the way, so that you can trust what you've got, because you've got to the level you've got to, because you're very good. And yet, and this is where and it's also where people have to unlearn stuff that's kind of in their way, because they've learned a process that helped them then, but actually it's not helping them now. And I think this whole concept of getting out of your own way can be as simple as tapping into the supercomputer, your unconscious mind, your instincts. You very rarely regret a decision you make on gut instinct. It's often the stuff that we overthink. So I can absolutely relate to that story for sure.
With the tipping point, obviously you talked about your tipping point. Where do you see the tipping point with your clients, or even the attendees on your courses? What's the tipping point from them?
I think in terms of there's a tipping point on an intro day. I remember doing an intro day a few years back, where most of our delegates are there because they've chosen to be there. Something sparked their curiosity and they've come along to an NLP intro day. And often it's a coaching client that's then gone, I want to learn more. But for this particular course, we had a number of people who've been sent by their bosses. So actually, myself and my co-trainer had done coaching or support their bosses, and they'd gone, you should go explore this. So we weren't getting as much back from people. It was a really funny one. We weren't getting and we were like, this is unusual. We're not getting as many questions. We're not getting as much interaction. And then just before, I think it was at the first break, I said, look, I'm just curious, from what we've covered this morning so far, what's your biggest takeaway? And this lady, she's the Eastern European lady, she went, well, if I'm completely honest, I'm still trying to process that model of the mind, because that has just completely blown my mind. And I was like, because it's so easy, isn't it, to forget that the vast majority of the population still think that their mind is processing accurately the world. And of course, we know that's not the case. The mind's actually acting more like a projector, projecting out your own values, beliefs, attitudes onto the world, and creating a very distorted view of reality. And so that moment when we realize that we're not our mind, and we're not really our body, we're the awareness of that screen that our mind is creating, is huge. It's completely life-changing. One of my best mates was a successful businessman, but also had a lot of conflict in his life. And he can pinpoint that moment to, oh my God, I've been acting as if I've been right all this time. So it's so obvious for us, having been in this world for so long, but that moment where you realize that the mind actually doesn't work the way that most people think it works is completely life-changing for people. Either in a massive, huge way, like for that lady, where she spent the rest of the day processing that and started reflecting back on her behavior and her conversations, and or in a subtle way where it opens the doorway to further learning. So I've from that moment, I slow down on that part of the course now and really let that moment, this model of mine, we could spend all day talking about it because it's got so much in it.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the big tipping points, I think.
I remember doing like it, with the training we do. I did a lot of coaching on the training, go to various courses. Obviously, we've done the trainers training as well. So it was a build up to get my knowledge, keep it going, and be prepared for trainers training, because it's such an intense time there, isn't it? You know. And I remember doing timeline therapy. We had a couple, male and female. They weren't a couple per se. It was just this male and female that were on the course. And I noticed this particular guy, and I'd noticed him during the course. And I kind of thought he was one of these that, you know, I'm the man. I know everything. This, that, and the other. And he did the trainings, and we was doing the timeline therapy. And obviously, the girl she was in tears. She was obviously, it impacted on her a lot. And then we did it with him, and he was buckets. He was just tears, and he was practically on the floor. And I'm like, come on, you need to get up here. I'm actually standing next to him and saying, I'm up here. Come on, let's get you lifted up. And then at the end, when we came back the next day, he was pacing up and down at the back of the room, and I'm thinking, what is he doing? You know, what's the matter with him? And he was holding his back. I thought, oh, he must have a bit of a bad back from sitting down. And that's just, is everybody okay? How did it go yesterday? And he said to him, I can't remember his name. And he said, how'd you get on? He went, I don't know. He said, I'm completely different now, and it's something he's done to me. I'm like, what? And I look at it, I thought, I'm in trouble here. And he went, I'm just a completely different person. It's impacted on me so much. And I'm thinking, wow, even seeing that, you know yourself, you've done it, it's impacting on you. But when you see it from other people's side, when you get that kind of reaction, either one, you've done a good job, but two, it's the fact is it's the powerfulness of that technique that's changed that person, and the realization and everything that's coming out of them. It's in floods, isn't it? All that expression, all that emotion, and everything that comes out. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really difficult to comprehend for people early on in the journey that it's possible to let go of the past, and it's possible to let go of the emotional scar tissue from the past. And there'll be a lot of people listening to this potentially who may be quite naturally skeptical and doubt that, and I certainly did. I also didn't think I needed it, which I definitely did. But you get to a point where you just know that works, and you get to a point of certainty with that. And I mean, I remember listening to Tad James's recordings of some of the training, and the phrase, you can't let go of what you're not aware of. So that phase, there's a tipping point when people become aware of what they need to let go of, and that's a huge moment, because that's more than half the journey, because the techniques always work. Like, at the time of every process, to let go of emotions and doubts and limiting beliefs always work. But that moment when the client becomes aware of what they need to let go of is also huge. Is also huge. So yeah, those are the deeper moments on the journey. And I think that starts from a realization, wherever it is, whether it be a conversation with somebody, whether it be a model of the mind on an NLP First Steps Day, whether it be just the impact somebody listening to somebody makes to you, think, wow, they see the world differently. Sometimes it's just an energetic thing as well. Somebody's just, you can sense is at peace, and you're like, oh, that makes you curious. What's that about? Because most people aren't. So yeah, I think there's all sorts of tipping points, and they're always interesting life stories as to what it was that's led people to where they're at. And it's not always the good stuff, is it? It's not always. You very rarely hear, oh, well, my life was perfect and it's continues to be perfect, because it's like that. A, life's not like that. And B, it's often this, as we said before, the struggle that leads us to look under the surface of life a little bit.
Yeah, it's just getting on, like you say, it's just getting under that surface, isn't it? And bringing everything that's hidden or we're hiding or holding back, and letting it go. My motivational mapping. Now I've done your motivate. I did yours some time ago, and I
Yeah.
actually do have my scores, funny enough, at the side of me.
Oh, well.
Uh, so tell us about motivational mapping.
Yeah, so I got involved with motivational mapping not long after I set my training and coaching company up, or rather it was just a coaching company at the time. And I put a post on LinkedIn, first one I ever did on values, and a chap got in contact with me and said, "Oh, well, this is an interesting post on values. I think if you're interested in value, you'll like this." Well, what this turned out to be was a motivational map. And at the time, I was transitioning out of I think it was around 2011, 12. So I was exiting employment, setting up the business, and the map just kind of really resonated with me at the time. So I came out as somebody motivated by meaning and purpose, freedom and independence, and creativity and innovation. And I was, like I say, I was working in local government at the time, and the freedom and the meaning scores, I think I scored myself 4 out of 10. And then a conversation with Nick about the map was part of the journey, actually, to the certainty of what I was doing was the right thing. That despite the nerves and the worry about leaving employment, setting up a business, actually it was a key moment, because I remember leaving that meeting being both exhilarated and terrified, because I was like, I'd kind of been playing at it. I'd set the business up. I'd kind of been moseying along, seeing clients evenings, weekends. I knew life was pretty good. I was getting paid. We were actually quite financially abundant because I was still employed, and I was getting paid extra money for therapy and coaching. But I was also just playing at it. I hadn't really fully committed to it yet. And that was the moment where I went, yeah. Because I never forget him saying, he said, "Look, it's not like you're ever going to want less freedom, Bevis." I was like, shit. Because of course there are certain, and it also resonates from an NLP point of view, because I remember on my trainer's training on 2013, I'd already become a mapper by that point, and I mapped everybody on my NLP trainer's training course, and I witnessed a values elicitation with a chap who's, and what's important to you in your career: prestige, recognition, status. All of these words were coming out, and I'd got his motivational map. I was looking at my phone going, "Oh, high star," and he was. So it was like, the credibility of actually what we get in a career values elicitation is kind of what we get from a motivational map, but chunked up. So STAR is a collection of, so each motivational preference, like STAR, is status, recognition, prestige, search of meaning, purpose, worthwhileness. So each preference has a cluster of values around them. So obviously, liking efficiency, the fact that I can get my clients to do a motivational map before we see them, you end up with a career values elicitation and a measure of how they're feeling their work is meeting their needs. With my coaching hat on, I'm like, wow, this is great, because I've got a lot of information about my client before we even start the journey. And putting my business hat on for a moment, it took me a while to notice this. In business, if you're going out into the corporate world, or you're going out into do trainings, if you're sitting down with somebody who's a decision maker and you know what motivates them, then you can make sure your language meets their needs. Because I remember vividly having a conversation with 2 directors. One was a super high searcher, and he was just bought in from yeah, we want to do this project, Bevis. So I can see the meaning behind it. The other chap was, I just couldn't get through to him, and despite all of the NLP skills I got at that time, I just was, because I was talking very unconsciously, very naturally about the purpose and how it would help people with the culture, and how it would help recognize people's needs, and how it would help it'd be very meaningful. And I looked down at the chap's map, and it's super high director, which is around power, control, influence. With next was expert. I think next was star. And then I looked down and went, oh. And of course, the other reason for doing this is that it will give you greater control over your own management and leadership style. You can continue to learn and grow and develop, and ultimately, as a result, get greater recognition from the politicians above and the team below. And at that point, it was really interesting. He tried to shut the meeting down. Yeah, let's do it. Right. Okay. I was like, wow, this is incredible. So yeah, the maps, I kind of, it's been a funny one. When I first did maps, I liked them, but I didn't love them.
Right.
Because I was so in love with NLP and time on therapy. I liked them. I could see the value of them, but I didn't love them. Whereas as I've spent a decade training other people, what I've noticed is that those people who trained in motivational maps and NLP are the ones that are really making a bigger difference and impact. And it's partly because the maps are a really simple, easy tool to talk about that opens up a window to deeper conversations. So I found that my first corporate coaching client came from somebody who completed a map, and his freedom score was 1 out of 10. And it was then really easy. It was, yeah, exactly. Power, yeah, 10 out of 10. Money, money control, control influence, 10 out of 10. Competition achievement, winning, financial return, 10 out of 10. Third motivator, freedom, 1 out of 10. And I was very, this would have been about 2013, I think, 2012, 13. I said, with not useful tonality, would you be interested in some coaching? And probably, perhaps more confidently than that. And he said, yeah, actually, I really would, because I feel like my PA is running my life, and I don't know how to, and I don't know how to stop doing what I'm doing. So, which then led to a deeper coaching journey with NLP and timeline therapy. And he was, as many business owners are, was driven away from poverty, and was kind of, I remember him saying, I'm only motivated when my arse is hanging out the window. So there was a sense of, I've got it. It was almost like, if I'm not motivated, I need to create a problem so that I can feel the motivation again. So I see the maps and NLP almost under the same umbrella. It's a tool that involves values with a measure of how people feel that work is meeting their needs. And so I've obviously written a book around motivational mapping for coaching, and in the network there are, so that's my specialism, but there are other specialists who've written books on motivational mapping for engagement, motivational mapping for leadership, because there are different specialisms. And I like the fact the maps, as it opens up doors. I never ever considered myself a consultant, and I probably still don't, but yeah, I have been into businesses as a consultant using the maps as a backdrop to that. I don't choose to do a huge amount of that now, but we do a little bit, and obviously we've got a team of practitioners who can, so and enjoy that work. So it often opens up new doorways for coaches or NLPers even, because it's you asked me explain NLP.
Yeah.
But it can sometimes be difficult to do that in a way in which resonates to somebody if you just met them at a networking meeting. Whereas now, if I was asked to explain what I do, I'd probably lead with the maps and say that we help people understand that what motivates them, and create alignment with what motivates them in their life. And then, because completing a map, it's often a nice soft starting point on a journey. And that's kind of how I like to use it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at you. You've got the different motivators. You've got your PMA scores, and then you've got your cluster.
Yeah.
Importance.
Yeah.
I can't read my handwriting. That's what it is. So, what is the difference with these then? What are we looking at when somebody sees these scores? What are they actually looking at?
So you've got 9 preferences. So we've got the relationship-based motivators, which are security, stability, which is the defender, the star, recognition, prestige, friend, belonging, wanting to be around people that you like, and spending time with people at work with people you like. Then we've got the achievement drivers, director, control, power, influence, builder, competition, winning, financial return, an expert, which is specialism, mastery. And of course, knowing what your top achievement driver is fascinating. Because if you're a super high director, you want to look upwards in an organization. If you're a high expert, you want to be looking for specialism. And that trips people up in their career, that one. Because often people look upwards because that's where the pay is. But actually, if you're a high expert, you want to be learning and specializing. And organizations need to be better at recognizing specialism. And then you've got the growth motivators, which most of our coaching network have a high dose of. So meaning and purpose, which is the searcher. We get a lot of our coaches are super high searchers and low builders. So we're motivated by meaning, purpose, helping other people, but not motivated by money. And that in itself can be a problem. And that's one of the other reasons I like maps, because it helps coaches be more commercially successful without necessarily focusing too much on, but seeing the alignment. And also the thing we find is often coaches and therapists aren't motivated by the same things decision makers in business are. So it helps create a language and helps an understanding of the differences between you and somebody who's a high director builder, and how to bridge that gap So that's why I love them now, because it helps great coaches, consultants, and therapists make more of an impact. And then the scores, I mean, anything, obviously we've not got any scores in front of us. And I was just thinking in the future, if you wanted to, we could share a screen and do something on that. But the
Like I say,
scores
I've got mine written down here. So if you needed to, it's interesting because the growth side was 41%, which was the highest one.
Yeah.
Now you've got my searcher at 9,
Yeah.
expert at 8, and then I've got creator, friend, and star at 7.
Yeah.
So what I see is I see a score, and then it says a PMA out of 10. But the scores, so say for instance, like my defender was the score was 29, but the PMA was 3.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah. So cool. It's a great question. So the defender scored 29. So anything above 20 is a strong motivation. So we get 2 sets of scores. The scores out of 10 are measuring levels of fulfillment.
Okay.
So, and of course, at the time, it will be very different now. That's the other nice thing about maps. It's measuring energy and where energy is flowing as opposed to personality, which is more fixed. So a defender score of 29, at that time in your life, there was a strong drive for security, stability. And whereas the score of 3 shows at that moment in time, you weren't feeling it. You weren't feeling secure and stable.
Right.
So that's why I love it as a coaching tool, because then if you've got that, you know, you kind of know where to start and which questions to ask.
Yeah.
And of course, from our NLP days, sometimes this is why it helped me. I realized I was conflicted at that point back in 2012, 13. I was conflicted. Part of me wanted security, part of me wanted freedom, which we can recognize what's needed at that point in terms of parts. So the map often kind of parts integration, or where you've got confliction in the client, jumps out of the map and you can go, we know that it's going to come up in the journey somewhere. You know that almost before you've done the first session. So yeah, so that the scores on the left, from which range, I mean, the lowest score is 1 and the highest is 39, 40, but usually the ranges are 10 to 30, 10 to 35. That's the strength of motivation, of what motivates. And then score out of 10 is levels of fulfillment.
Right.
So from a coaching point of view, what we're trying to do is help our clients feel more fulfilled in their work. So that's
because spirit was, my score was 23, but the PMA was 3.
Yeah. So again, at that time, I'd like to say it was probably, and that, interestingly, that was probably a similar. So if you've got too much, so you've got freedom and security both being important, neither fulfilled.
Yeah.
So I'm now thinking, why didn't we have a conversation about the map at the time? But anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That'll be another conversation at another time. I knew I should have followed it up. But you know, Builder was 10 and 4.
Yeah.
Director was 11 and 6.
Yeah. And that's, so we've got 2 achievement drivers there: power, control, influence. The director, the builder, money, competition, winning, not particularly important, but also not as fulfilled as they could be. And that's what we often see with higher searchers, lower builders, is that we need to just make sure we pay enough attention to what's at the bottom of the map.
Right.
So we call it an Achilles. So for me, my Achilles heel is I'm a really low star.
Right.
So because I'm not motivated by recognition, what I struggle with is putting myself out there and being motivated to. So these things are great. Somebody going, do you want to be on a podcast? Yeah, I can share my knowledge, but I don't have to promote myself. Somebody else is doing it for me.
Yeah.
So I think, so we all tend to have Achilles factors in business, and that's the other useful area for coaching, is helping somebody appreciate where their Achilles heel might be.
Definitely be having another conversation about that. I think I do need to follow up on my scores, because it'd be something that I think, you know, we all have, you know, those conflicts that you mentioned. So, you know, it's finding them and getting them in the right way, you know, to make that, to get on the level that we want to be at, isn't it? You know, we want that even keel, and be fulfilled and happy and doing what we want to be doing. But we just need to tweak the little things at times to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you say, that the map came along at a great time for me, because helped me realize that the path I was on was the right path. There was a level of reassurance. Actually, I am doing what's aligned, but it also showed a little bit of misalignment with the security. And I remember one particular chap on our course who had a conflict in the map. His wife I spoke to his wife, and I thought, oh, great, we've probably got an NLP delegate there. Well, she'd actually booked her husband on the course, which was never had that happen before or since. I'm still connected with both of them, and interested. I'm speaking to this chap today, ironically, interestingly. It's funny how things work, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, he had completed a map and had freedom and security to conflict, and then went through the course. Was quite skeptical about the unconscious mind, and he was the demo subject for parts. And it was interesting because he couldn't write his goal until he'd had gone through that process. And on day 5 or 6, he burst in. He came in with more enthusiasm and said, I've now worked out how I can have a business model with security and freedom. Really? And we now have his goal as our case study, because he kind of really pivoted from one for working recruitment to working leadership development. So yeah, I mean, that's not everyone's journey, but it still amazes me how dealing with an internal conflict can have a massive difference, massive impact on people's lives, because we know that it's not an arduous process, it's not a long process, but the effect it can have can be huge.
You talked about the two people. The one was the director who wasn't getting it or wasn't feeling it. What came to mind when you were saying that is the difference between motivational mapping and maybe disc profiling.
Yeah.
Is there a similarity, or is there something there? Because obviously disc profiling is finding the right person for the job, being able to tap into that person with the right communication skills. Is there a similarity between the two?
There is a small similarity. There is a similarity. Things with Belvin as well. There's a small similarity. There's a bit of actually the Enneagram in the map. So right. James Sale, who created the map, spoke at our conference, and he spoke on the Enneagram because he's very passionate about the Enneagram. Did it in a funny way. He got everyone to nominate what kind of type they are on the Enneagram, and then went, oh yeah, and these are your strong points, so you're this and you're this and you're this, and everyone's going, yeah, and oh, by the way, you're only doing this because you need to be loved, or whatever it was. And everyone went, oh, he kind of gave everybody an uppercut at the end, which you couldn't do it. It was laughing and finding it funny. So the difference with maps is really that it's not personality. There's a smidgen of personality in there with the Enneagram, but actually 90% of the tool is about motivation and energy and values. So one way of describing it is it's an online values list station, really, with an added measure of how well you're feeling that your values are being met in work. So it's pretty unique. It's also a self-perception inventory, so it's not a psychometric, which again is different. So it's about your perceptions of yourself. And that also does sometimes flag up interesting things, that what sometimes people repress stuff. So I've had people where we've explored the bottom motivator and find out that it's absolute nonsense, that they are really motivated by recognition, they're just squashing it. And that's because somewhere they'd been taught that they shouldn't be motivated, or they shouldn't stick their head above the parapet, or they shouldn't blow their own trumpet, for example. So then you do some NLP work to free them up, loosen them up, and all of a sudden you redo a map, and all of a sudden stars third in their map. So yeah, it's quite different to anything personality based, and it's really fascinating that if you look online, pretty much all of the tools out there are personality based. There's very little about motivation. And I also enjoy, I like the simplicity of it. It only takes 10 or 12 minutes online. I mean, there's a good example actually in this conversation. It is important to have a conversation with a practitioner about the map, because a lot more comes out of that than just the map on its own. So yeah, you can tell I'm quite passionate about them.
No, absolutely, so it's brilliant. It's brilliant, and I do. It was quite simple to do when I did it. It was great that the message come out and say, why don't you have a go at this? And then it is a case of following up and getting it after that. And I think you're absolutely right. overall, I think, mate, thanks so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to finally get to speak to you and everything. Um, one last thing is your 5 minutes of fame. So the floor is yours to tell the world, or the 150 people who watch this thing. No, hopefully the world will tell the world about about yourself and anything that how do people get in touch with you, etc. All yours.
Yeah. So this is always gonna, when you said what we were gonna do today, I was like, yeah, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. This was the bit I thought, And it's interesting now talking about being a low star, because now it's about the self-promotion bit. I'm struggling a little bit. So yeah, I think primarily you can get in touch with me through email address bevis@magentacs.co.uk. You can have a look at our website, Magenta Coaching Solutions. If there's anything that I've said today that resonates or is of interest, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. But more importantly, what I would say is, for me, it's not about self-promotion. It's just getting people to understand that there are, in alignment with the purpose of this podcast, is getting people to appreciate that if you're a bit stuck, a little bit stuck, not quite feeling aligned, then it's easy, isn't it, to just go, oh, well, it's easy to use gratitude as a way of going, well, yeah, but I should be grateful. And I think a lot of people do that. They make comparisons between people who are worse off. And it's still a comparison. It's still a comparison. So comparisons aren't particularly useful. So we're meant to live lives of fulfillment and enjoyment. And if you're feeling a little bit out of alignment, better to catch it when you're a little bit out of alignment than end up a lot out of alignment. So I would just say, anybody, either get in touch with yourself or with us, or indeed anybody else that you've listened to on a podcast that actually their message resonates with you. My message would be just take some action.
Yeah.
Take some action, and you'll be surprised at the benefit you receive from whoever you end up working with. Because I'm fairly sure, knowing you, I don't know you that well, Darren, but I've really enjoyed the time we spent together, and fairly sure everybody you've had on this has got a lot to offer to people. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and the only final thing I would say is, if you're into your golf and you want to improve your golf game, we've got a new online, so this is the bit of self-promotion, we've got a new online product called Maximize Your Performance. So yeah, if that sounds of interest to any budding golfers out there that want to improve their mental game, then please do get in touch, because we've got a new launch happening right now.
Well, if you've got any material, mate, let me know, because I tend to pop down to Mere Golf Club a lot. So, if you need to, I'm down there on a regular basis. So, not playing golf, it's for another thing, but I won't go into that one. But yeah, the Mere Golf Club, it's a very prestigious place. Might be useful for you to promote in there.
Definitely. No, I'll share the website and the initial launch video. That'd be great. Thank you.
Great stuff. Bevis, thanks again, mate. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you and chat with you. As always, we'd like to thank our supporters as well. We've got PromoDoodle, the Professional Bodyguard Association, Burnley and District Motorcycle Group, and Mira Gavaccio. And as always, any donations for our retreat and training centre for men and veterans that we're aiming for, you can get through on the GoFundMe, the retreat and training centre, and our easy fundraising page under the Mindcore. So if you want to join it, you can always get, the good thing about easy fundraising is that you buy stuff online, you buy it through the app, you go through your various, like Amazon or your shopping, and they pay your donations. It's not about you. The free donations are from the companies. So please do. And I thank you again, Bevis. Thanks very much. Sorry, Alexandra's not here. She does pass apologies on. So everybody, thanks a lot, and look forward to the next episode. Thanks a lot. Take care.